I'm not exaggerating when I say this should be illegal. I don't know, with all the crazy stuff Uber and Lyft has done and is doing, I don't know how they're still doing this and getting away with it. And that is algorithmic wage discrimination. I know a huge phrase, but overall, what Uber and Lyft is doing is they're paying drivers differently based off their data. And this is pretty ridiculous. Now, right here, I'm on this article on marketplace.org. They're talking about Prop 22 in California. It was a big thing if rideshare drivers stay as independent contractors or become employees. It was revisited as well, right? But in this case, we're pretty much still independent contractors. But going down here, there's a huge study on how ride-hail drivers are compensated. There's a huge thing right here. You can see, I'm just obviously scraping the surface on this video. And you can see right here on algorithmic wage discrimination. Uber and Lyft, based off your data and a lot of other factors, decide to just pay drivers less or pay drivers more. They decide to give you maybe not that many rides or more rides when they feel like it, which is kind of ridiculous. And as you can imagine, we are just scraping the iceberg here with all this kind of stuff. And as you can see right here, she found that the companies use data they collect about drivers' behavior to set personalized wages. They call it, as I said before, algorithmic wage discrimination. If they were considered employees, this would likely be illegal, but they're not. And so they're just not protected. I know the whole discussion of being an independent contractor or being an employee super heated, especially when it comes to ride sharing. But this is one legitimate argument in favor of becoming employees, because we're going to go down here. This was kind of like a mini transcript in terms of an interview. So I'm going to go down here, right? Explain to me how it works in real life. So for example, they said, here's an example of someone doing my research. I'll call Diego. He was working in downtown LA during a really busy time period, and Diego was getting close to getting a bonus. And that bonus was going to increase his hourly wage so he would make more money. However, he just wasn't getting a ride. And he said he felt the reason he wasn't getting a ride was because Uber knew he was close to the bonus. So they purposely put him in a pool of drivers where he was going to get less rides. And that's what they did. And they made him work longer for less money as a result of just trying extremely hard and not getting that many rides. So when he calculated his hourly wage, it was far lower than someone who is not as close to achieving their bonus, which is kind of ridiculous, right? So Uber noticed, okay, he almost has a bonus and he's going to be making more money. So we're just purposely going to give him maybe worse rides, cheaper rides, or no rides at all. And here's what things that's so crazy is, what does Uber have to say about this? And is this legal? So Uber embraces this. This is sort of their brave new world of work. They call it dynamic pricing, which is a very interesting way to word that. They said that this is sort of how they are able to control drivers when they can't, because they consider the drivers to be independent contractors. It is illegal to do this. It is tough to say, right? Who knows if this is going to be another big issue that gets brought up in the media. It might violate two existing systems of wage laws that we have, minimum wage and overtime laws, which say that workers are supposed to get a specific amount per hour. But because Uber claims these workers are independent business people, that these laws don't apply to them. And if they were employees, this would, I feel like it would have to be illegal, and they're just not protected. And so you can see here, is it possible that employment in this country is just so old and has not caught up? They talk about here about like different aspects of workers' compensation, if you get injured while driving, coverage and whatnot. But overall, the biggest thing about this article is the fact that Uber and Lyft are paying drivers differently. And again, this is super messed up. Now, this, of course, brings up a lot of really interesting questions, because I remember, and I did a video about this years ago, actually. Me and one of my good girlfriends, we were going out. We went to order an Uber, and she goes, wow, I can't believe it's $30 to go there. And I was like, it's $20. What are you talking about? I thought maybe she entered it in wrong. I entered it in wrong. Maybe the surges went up and her phone was more quick on the surges than mine, or I don't know. So we closed out the apps, reopened them. Turns out both were still exactly the same. She was being charged $30 for the same exact ride, while I was being charged $20 for the same exact ride. Now, If it was a few cents, I'd be like, still kind of weird, but it's a few cents. But $10, that's a 50% increase. And remember, on one side, I was looking at this from a passenger's perspective as a rider. I was like, that's kind of weird that they're charging us such vastly different amounts. But then, with this being said, it brings up an interesting question. If a driver went to come and pick us up in that situation, would he or she get more or less money from my ride? Would they get more money from her ride because it's $30? Would Uber and Lyft pay the driver the same amount, even though they're charging her $30 and charging me $20? What happens on the driver's side? It is an interesting question, and it comes into this play, like I mentioned, with algorithmic wage, discrimination, that it's just so, I gotta be honest, I guess in some ways it's surprising, but not, let's be blunt, but it is super messed up that with Uber and Lyft, they were purposely based off a bunch of different data, right? I mean, a lot of people, when they think of wage discrimination, they think of, maybe something when it comes to sex or gender, right? In terms of male versus female, that, the whole wage gap and everything. They think of maybe things with race, right? Like white versus black, maybe sexual orientation, as in straight versus LGBTQ plus, all these different factors of wage discrimination. And these are things that have been brought up a lot, of course, in legal systems and whatnot, because it is super messed up and, of course, clearly illegal. But this is another whole aspect of that coin that's not really been talked about, and that is the data. If, let's say, a driver's close to getting a bonus, they're purposely going to throttle them to not get that many rides, or maybe get worse rides. Let's say, and I'm making this up, in order for you to get a bonus, you have to do, 10 more rides today. They might make it super hard for you to get those rides. Who knows if they give you, let's say, super cheap rides, so maybe you don't hit a certain threshold to get that bonus. And granted, this is just one situation too. This is just one case that, as we're talking about Diego, this could apply to a bunch of different areas. I mean, let's say you're making a lot of money, you're hitting surges. Uber and Lyft might say, hey, you know what? Based off all this data, we just feel like we don't want to pay them anymore or pay them a bit less. We're just going to give them horrible rides. As opposed to giving them those big banger surge rides that are very long and you're covering a lot of miles, we're just going to give you short ones because we feel like it, right? And again, at the end of the day, remember, this is about the number one thing of Uber and Lyft getting more money, right? Their businesses, that is their goal, and they're going to squeeze like a sponge as much as they can out of the Uber and Lyft drivers. And again, this is what causes a lot of very, very tricky issues, right? Because as you can imagine, as a driver, if you make more money normally, that's going to benefit Uber and Lyft. The more money you make, the more money they make, right? And that feasibly should be the way it should work out, but that's not the case. Because if, let's say, you get bonuses, if, let's say, you get these incentives that you're doing the same amount of rides, but just getting paid more for them, as opposed to a driver not getting those bonuses, now Uber and Lyft is missing out on money, right? Let's say you get a big bonus, and I'm just making this up. Well, let's say for one driver, let's say they just started driving, they get $100 for 5 rides, right? I'm making this up. They get $100 for 5 rides. But then let's say because of your bonus structure, you get $150 for those 5 rides. Uber and Lyft is still receiving the same amount of money, yet in the case with that person having that bonus, they now have to shell out more money, which means in a sense they lose money more of the experienced driver having those bonuses than someone who just started out who doesn't have those bonuses. And as you can imagine for Uber and Lyft, especially because you're an independent contractor, they might say this, they might look at this and be like, what if we just instead not give them that many rides? Give more rides to this person because we're going to shell out less money and we're going to, in the long run, based off the profit margin, make more money from the beginning driver. Again, we're just scraping the surface here. There's so much to this, right? And obviously on this video, I'm very curious to see if more data comes out because, like I said, there's a lot of discrimination when it comes to wage gaps and everything for numerous different ways, numerous different classes and whatnot, like I mentioned, and it's a huge issue. But this is one that's really not been talked about. This is really my first time ever seeing anything talking about the huge issues when it comes to data discrimination and how they look at different drivers and say, hey, you know what? We just know maybe we can make more money if we don't give them that many rides. We can make more money if we give this one person more rides. We can make more money if we give this one person just horrible rides that are just kind of like down the street. and we're going to make more money if we give this person, I don't know, these huge long rides that are great, right? I mean, again, so much to this, but I really hope this brings up more light, again, because this is my first time seeing this, that I have seen, maybe I'll call it passenger discrimination, right? Like I mentioned with me, one of my good girlfriends, charging her $30, charging me $20, didn't really make any sense, right? However, if that's happening on this side, I guess it makes sense it's happening on the other side. It's happening for drivers that, let's say, if two drivers theoretically get the same exact ride, it is possible that they're going to charge one driver, or excuse me, let me reverse that. They're going to pay one driver more or less than another driver for the same ride just because they feel like it.